and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the Hunger Games, Greek and Roman mythology, references, and similarities. So I'm doing this for two reasons mainly. The first is I've been studying the Greek and Roman mythology lately in AP seminar, and I'm also currently really interested in the Hunger Games because of its new novel release, Sunrise on the Reaping. I have lost count of how many times I've read the trilogy. And the second reason is because I recently saw this video on YouTube where a girl did a 55-minute long talk on the references between the Hunger Games and the Greek and Roman mythology, and I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. I have some things to add to it, and I also have some of my original ideas, so here I am. And without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so the first part is going to be the general references, basically meaning I'm not going to be focusing on a single character or a single book. I'm going to focus on the main concepts of the whole book series. So the first one is the Hunger Games itself. So the core inspiration is the premise of sending children to die as a punishment for rebelling against the capital comes from a myth of Theseus and the Minotaur, in which Athens must send 7 boys and 7 girls to Crete to be devoured by the Minotaur as a punishment for causing the death of Androgeus, the son of King Minos of Crete. So in the story, Katniss is very similar to Theseus, who volunteers to stop the cycle of sending these tributes into the labyrinth, whereas Katniss volunteers to go in place of her sister Prim. And the arena is very much like the labyrinth. Both are deadly. It has shifting environments used to test and trap the participants. The second general concept is the capital as Rome reborn, especially the Ballad of the Songbirds and Snakes. You can see a lot of Roman elements in them. There's this plaza, and in the middle of the plaza there was a statue that somewhat symbolized Athena or Artemis, or Aphrodite for that matter, and then she was holding 2 blades that crossed over her head, and back then I was like, well, that's definitely a Greek or Roman element. So Panem, the name actually itself, comes from the Latin word for bread and circuses. I just searched up the SPQR symbol and just note how similar it is with the flag of Panem. The capital's extravagance, decadence, and obsession with spectacle closely mirrors the excesses of ancient Rome before its decline, and with the capital that's before the capital's decline, because eventually it does. Did I forget to mention that there will be a lot of spoilers? So if you have not read the trilogy or Sunrise or the Ballad, please do, or if you don't mind spoilers, then just listen on, I guess. And then also, in the capital, you can see people wearing extravagant clothes, togas, cosmetics, chariots. The capital's fashion, architecture, and public games draw directly from Roman culture. And the third one, it's not as obvious, the connection is not often made, which is the game makers as, like, kind of gods, I guess. Because when you come to think of Roman and Greek gods, they're kind of like high up on Mount Olympus and trying to manipulate everyone, looking down upon us, which is kind of like how the game makers are looking down upon the tributes and playing with them in that game controls room. I'll put a picture up there. You can see that the game makers are kind of like Greek gods, manipulating, playing, pushing, and rewarding their tributes. And the arena is a microcosm of mythological fate and divine intervention, whereas participants are at the mercy of unseen powers, namely mutations, natural disasters. They're not natural, obviously. And the next part is the districts. I think the districts are a really big part of the Hunger Games, and a lot of people like particular districts. They make fan fictions based upon them. I'm talking about myself. For some reason, I favor District 3. I always have. I don't know why. Let's start with the career districts. I started with these instead of like in numerical order because they're a very special part of Panem. They're not the capital. They're not like the other districts. They're somewhere in between, and they're just as manipulated as everyone else. But at the same time, they're just as brutal as the capital. So how would you actually see them? Well, there are 3 references I'm going to make here. First, Sparta and ancient warrior classes. Like Spartan warriors who were trained from childhood to fight and glorify war, the careers were raised to become elite fighters for the capital, making violence their primary purpose in life. Achilles in heroic sacrifice. The careers somewhat resemble these heroes, like Achilles, who was the Aristos Achaean, the best of Greeks, chose to die young with glory rather than live long and peaceful life. Similarly, the careers volunteer for the Hunger Games at the risk of their own lives, seeing fame and honor even if it means sacrificing themselves. But sometimes they don't think that because they're arrogant and they're self-confident. They think that they'll make it out alive, I guess. And the last one is somewhat a bit more abstract than the first two, is that they're kind of like siblings with the other districts, except they're turning on their brothers and sisters so that they can gain more fame and glory and riches, because obviously the careers are wealthier than like the other ones. They killed their fellow tributes, even those from their own districts, for survival and victory. They turn on each other. That's just human nature, I guess. It doesn't even have to be a direct reference to any Greek or Roman. I think that is pretty common in every single one of our cultures. And then we're going to move on to the other districts in numerical order. I've always thought that the 12 districts, or 13 if you count District 13, kind of were related to the gods. District 1, luxury, with Aphrodite or Venus, because you see their tributes being super glamorous and beautiful, especially Glimmer. When you come to think of Glimmer, she's like this glimmering girl who is very sexy and, you know. And even Marvel, I think he has a way of talking that just makes people feel attracted to him. District 2, they're mainly the masonry and military districts. I think that would be associated with Ares or Mars, god of the war, and its tributes are very brutal and violent. That's a pretty obvious connection. District 3, technology, I'd say Hephaestus or Athena, but obviously Hephaestus would be like better because he's literally the god of blacksmith and invention. Tributes are often brilliant but socially awkward, and that's the case with Hephaestus because it's funny. Hephaestus was thrown from Olympus when he was a baby because his mother, Hera, thought he was super ugly, and then he ended up being crippled the rest of his life, so that kind of makes him socially awkward, which is how most tributes from District 3 are kind of like. But again, that's kind of a stereotype, and I wouldn't like to stereotype any district. And then District 4, fishing. That's pretty obvious, Poseidon. And you can even see Poseidon in their characters. Finnick Odair, he's a magnetic figure. It almost channels Poseidon's charisma and danger. Sometimes I relate him with Percy Jackson, but he doesn't really look like him. Other than that, I think he's very sassy and like a badass. That just kind of brings him even closer to relations with Percy. Anyways, District 5, power or energy, that would be Zeus, except District 5 is not very dominant among the other districts, so that would be kind of like hard to say, except its main product, power, sustains the capital's infrastructure, and power is Zeus's domain, so I guess we just have to connect to that. District 6, transportation, Hermes or Mercury, god of travel, trade, and speed, but he's also the god of trickery, and I guess that would not be associated with 6. And then District 7, lumber. I actually hadn't thought of that, so I asked ChatGPT, and then it gave me this answer saying District 7 could be associated with Artemis and Diana. So this one is not my idea, but this is ChatGPT's. I think it actually makes some sense because Artemis is the goddess of wilderness and forests. So again, this is kind of like District 5. It's not that obvious and it's not a direct link, but we can say that it's a pass. 8. Textiles. This is where we put Athena. I wanted to put her in 3, but I guess is the goddess of weaving and strategy. Again, this actually fits pretty well because strategy kind of defines District 8's position in the Second Rebellion. Well, like with Commander Page coming in and then the bombing of the District 8 hospital, and then that is the direct reason Katniss agrees to be the Mockingjay, I guess. District 9, grain, Demeter or Ceres, goddess of agriculture. District 10, Pan or Faunus. I actually think this is a harder link to make because Pan is not one of the major gods in Greek or Roman mythology, but it does make sense. District 11, Persephone, I guess, daughter of spring, also linked to Demeter. And it actually makes some sense because Persephone was like a kind of like a sacrifice. She doesn't live very well. She lives in oppression in the underworld. That's kind of like the state of people from District 11. They live in poverty most of the time. District 12, mining. So that would be associated with Hades, Pluto, the god of the underworld and minerals. And now we come to District 13. Now you might be wondering why I'm putting a whole slideshow for 13. The reason is I think this district has numerous gods that can represent. First of all, Hestia, or Vesta, goddess of hearth. Hestia keeps fire of the household alive. It's kind of like how 13 hides underground, sustaining the last hope for rebellion, keeping the spark of it alive. Also, Hades, god of the underworld. District 13 is very much isolated from the other districts after it was bombed and destroyed after the first rebellion. So living in the underworld is kind of like opposite to the capital, which is kind of like the upper world. And 3, Prometheus, the firebringer and titan. District 13 is kind of like the bringer of spark for the rebellion. And it's kind of like Prometheus, who was eternally hung on the cliff and then had to like have his liver torn out by a Vulcan. 13 gives power to the districts at a great cost, namely destroyed. That basically summarizes up the 13 districts and its similarities or references to the Olympian gods and other minor deities. So we'll leave it at that for the districts. Okay, so moving on, now we're going to be talking about some of our favorite characters. So starting up with the trilogy, we have Katniss Everdeen. Just to clarify, I did not make every single character a reference to like Greek mythology or Roman mythology. I only made some of the obvious ones or the ones that I could think of. For example, Peeta is not in here because I did not really think that there was something I wanted to analyze about his character. So I'm sorry, Peeta fans, but I don't have him here, and just because I might have a character doesn't mean I don't like the other ones. So that's just a clarification, and let's move on. So Katniss Everdeen. First of all, I see her as Prometheus very much. Just as Prometheus stole fire from the gods to give to humanity, Katniss brings on the rebellion and hope to the districts. Both are punished for empowering the masses, as in Prometheus is punished by having his liver torn out by a Vulcan every single day. And Katniss she's forced into this relationship that she doesn't really want, and her family is threatened. District 12 was destroyed. They both pay prices. And also, the Mockingjay itself becomes a forbidden symbol of the rebellion, kind of like fire or knowledge for humanity. So I see her as Artemis because both are hunters and gatherers. They both use bows and arrows. They both have healing abilities. Also, Katniss is very independent. She's reluctant to fit in traditional roles, and she chooses to remain free from romantic entanglements until forced to choose between like Gale and Peeta, which is sort of the capital's manipulation, and it's not her fault. So that's similar to Artemis's determination to steer clear of love. And also, there is an outside reference that I'd like to make to Percy Jackson fans, because I see Katniss and Prim as daughters of Apollo. There's this theory that Katniss's dad did not actually die in the mine. He was Apollo, and a lot of people think that because Katniss, she's archery, she can sing, she can heal, and she probably joined the Hunters of Artemis. Prim would be like, she can heal, she's a healer, and she also sings pretty well. But obviously we have that possibility eliminated from the Sunrise because we know who her father is and how he died. So that's pretty much like a fan theory. Next up we have Gale. A lot of people don't like Gale. I'm not going to be talking about like whether he's likable. I'm only going to be comparing him to Hercules. Or Heracles, a lot of people call him. Heracles is one of the greatest heroes in Greek mythology, known for his immense strength, courage, and his role in completing the 12 labors. He is also often portrayed as driven by a sense of justice and desire to protect his people. So Gale actually shares that with Heracles, his strength, loyalty, aggressive desire for justice, very aggressive, and it kind of ends up like badly for both of them, where Heracles eventually kills his entire family due to his violent actions, and Gale ends up accidentally killing Prim in a bomb that was meant to like destroy the capital, or at least threaten the capital. They both end up losing people who were dear to them due to their kind of reckless behavior and their like pursuit for justice in a violent way. So that is a connection I'd like to make over here. And from the Sunrise of the Reaping, that means we're done from characters from the trilogy. If you'd like to add any more, feel free to share them in the comments. I'm just going to like put in some of the most obvious ones that I like to make. From the Sunrise, there's this thing that I see, which is Beatty's punishment. And I kind of see Beatty as Daedalus, with both geniuses. And if I were to place Daedalus in a district, come on, let's just be honest, he's in District 3 for sure. So while in Crete, Minos used Daedalus' love for his son Icarus, bounding him to his reign. He wanted to leave. I remember reading Circe by Madeline Miller, and then there was this part, Circe asks Daedalus, well, why don't you just leave? And then Daedalus was like, well, I have a son, and Minos knows I love my son that much. Basically goes without saying how Minos is controlling Daedalus. That's kind of like how the capital punished Beatty for his actions of trying to hack the capital's like control system, communication system. So as retribution, the capital reaps his son, Ampert, for the 50th Hunger Games. Ampert is 12 years old, and he's obviously not going to live. And also forces Beatty to mentor him, which is horrifying. That's just disgusting. Compelling him to witness his son's unavoidable demise. Moving on, we have Hamich's Lost. I would compare Hamish to Orpheus. Orpheus, Greek musician who journeyed to the underworld to retrieve his wife, Eurydice. He was instructed not to look back at her until they reached the surface, so overcome with doubt, he turned to look, losing her forever. Hamish, District 12 victor, who outsmarts the capital, but causes the death of his mother and brother and unknowingly gives his girlfriend, Lenore Dove Baird, poison candy from the capital. It's not his fault, but he is the direct reason that they're actually dead. Because the capital, obviously, they see him as a rebel. He outsmarted them, so he has to pay. His family has to die. The connection between Hamish and Orpheus is that both characters feel responsible for their loved one's death, so they suffer irreversible loss. Their actions result in permanent loss of their loved ones, highlighting the theme of fate and consequence. So the thing is, if Hamish hadn't given Lenore that bag of candy, if Orpheus hadn't looked over her shoulder to check if her wife was actually there, well, then their loved ones might be alive, but they did. And that part was part of the authorities' manipulation, Hades' manipulation, the capital's cruel playing with Hamish's mind, stuff like that. Sunrise, a heartbreaking book. That was pretty much like, I spoiled the whole thing, so if you did not want spoilers, I warned you before, and don't blame me, please. Moving on, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So this is where we have Icarus's connection to Sejanus Plinth. He is going to be the only character I'm going to be analyzing out of Sunrise. I'm not going to be analyzing Coriolanus Snow because he's too complicated. I'm sorry, all the bad emperors and power-hungry brats that you see in Roman and Greek history, I would link them to Coriolanus. He's just like a complete villain. I just don't like him. Anyways, Sejanus Plinth, I link him to Icarus because Icarus, in the myth, he flies too close to the sun despite his father's warnings that his wings were made of wax. So eventually his wings melt and he tragically falls to his death. And Sejanus Plinth mirrors his reckless behavior. His defiant rebellion against the capital, marked by his impulsive actions, leads to his death. So it's not only his planning to help Arlo Chance's girlfriend escape the prison and then like kind of rise a rebellion within District 12. It's also that he completely ignores the rules of the arena and then recklessly goes into the arena actually to like try and drag Marcus out, and he actually dumbly thinks that the capital will broadcast that to all of the districts. So yeah, he is brave and daring to challenge authority, but he ignores the risks and consequences of challenging a powerful force, which results in this tragic end. Now, I'm not saying that we should not challenge authority when it's wrong. I mean, Katniss did, but her behavior was more like calculated. She was more careful when she knew that the Capitol would kill Gale if she did not cooperate and be with Peeta. She cooperated. She eventually became the symbol of rebellion, but that was like, she had like a whole group behind her. She didn't just plan with a couple of District 12 kids who didn't know what they were doing or who were like mentally unstable. I'm talking about Billy Tope here. So yeah, that basically summarizes everything I have for the characters. Alright guys, so that's everything I have for today. If you like this video, please remember to like and subscribe. Even though this is my first video and it's probably like not all that good, but I am planning to make on more analyzing videos in the future. I do like books a lot, so if anyone are like me, they storm up ideas in the middle of the night, or like you have strange theories that nobody really cares about and then makes them into a video, then you're like me and you'll probably love this channel as much as I enjoy creating stuff here. So yeah, I guess I'll see you guys in my next video, whenever that'll be.